A cheerful welcome to this happy learning lesson. Today, let's see the short story Through the Tunnel by British writer Doris Lessing. This is a short biography about Doris Lessing. She was born in Iran to two British expatriates, a former military officer and a former nurse. And Doris Lessing led a travel-filled life from an early life. Doris was attending a Roman Catholic school in the capital of Salisbury, now Harare, but dropped out when she was 13 and Lessing entirely self-educated herself. Doris Lessing started to write shortly thereafter and held a number of odd jobs for many years. By 1943, she had already married and she became active in socialist politics. After many years of selling short stories to magazines, Doris Lessing published her first novel, The Grass is Singing, in the year 1950. Doris Lessing has published over 50 novels which move between social realism to science fiction and many styles in between, all the while focusing in political themes. At the age of 88, Lessing won the Nobel Prize in Literature, making her the oldest winner in that category and only the 11th woman to ever win the prize. Coming to the story, this was written in the year 1955 and it was originally published in the American literary weekly magazine, The New Yorker, in 1955. It belongs to modernism and the genre is realism. The setting is a foreign seaside, and here we find Jory, a young English boy, and his widowed mother who are vacationing at a beach. They have come to many times in years past. Though the beach's exact location is not given, it's obviously a foreign country. Both the mother and the son, they try to please each other and not impose too many demands. The mother is determined to be neither possessive nor lacking in devotion, and Jerry in turn acts from an unfailing impulse of contribution, which could be termed as a sort of chivalry. On the second morning of their vacation, Jerry notices that a kind of wild rocky bay which he wishes to explore. This rocky bay he had glimpsed from the park. He wanted to act grown up and not constantly travel with his mother. His constantaneous mother sends him on his way with what she hopes is a casual air, and Jerry the leaves behind the crowded beach, which was safe once to him, where he's always played. A strong swimmer, Jerry plunges in and goes so far out that he can see his mother only as a small yellow speck on the other beach. Looking back to shore, Jerry sees some boys strip off their clothes and go running down to the rocks. The boys are off the coast. All of them were burned, smooth, dark brown, and speaking a language he did not understand. To be with them was a craving that filled his whole body. He watches the boys, who are older and bigger than he is, until finally one waves at him and Jerry swims eagerly over. As soon as they realize he's a foreigner, though they forget about him, but he's happily just to be among them. Jerry joins them in diving off a high point into the water for a while, and then the biggest boy dives in and does not come up. One moment, the morning seemed full of chattering boys. The next, the surface of the water were empty, but through the heavy blue, dark shapes could be seen moving and grouping. Derry dives down too and sees a black wall of rock looming at him. When the boys come on one by one, on the other side of the log, he understood that They had swim through some gap or some hole in it. However, he could not see um, anything. He could see nothing through the stinging salt water but the blank rock. Jerry feels failure and shame, yelling at them first in English and then in nonsensical French, the pleading grin on his face like a scar that he could never remove. The boys dive into the water all around him and he panics when they do not come back to the surface. Only when he has mentally counted to 160 does he admit that they have gone for sure. Believing they are leaving to get away from him, he cries himself out. He spends the next several days contemplating swimming through the rock tunnel himself and he practices holding his breath underwater. After one round of practice, his nose bleeds profusely and he worries that the same might happen when he is exploring the rocky tunnel in that he really might die trapped and saved. He feels insecure, but then he's determined to the core to reach his goal, to go through the tunnel. He resolves to wait until the day before he leaves when his mother says that they will be gone in 4 days, but an impulse overtakes him. 2 days beforehand, and he feels that he must make his attempt immediately, now or never. He was trembling with fear that he would not go, and he was trembling with horror at the long, long tunnel under the rock, under the sea. Once inside the tunnel, he begins counting, swimming cautiously, feeling both victory and panic. He must go on into the blackness ahead, or he would drown. His head was swelling, his lungs cracking. He was no longer quite conscious. Even when he surfaces, he fears he would sink now and drown. He would not swim. He could not swim the few feet back to the rock. The climax of the story through the tunnel is that after many days of training, Jerry swims through the underwater tunnel. He succeeds in his mission. The protagonist is, of course, Jerry. There is no antagonist, no traditional antagonist. But Jerry's own fears and physical limitations throughout the story can be taken as his antagonist. The point of view is close third person omniscient point of view. When the story was first published in 1955, the aftermath of the Second World War could still be felt through Hero. How or when Jerry lost his father is never mentioned within the story itself. But it's entirely feasible that he was one of the nearly 500,000 British casualties from that war, and that Jerry's mother is one of the many war widows who suddenly became single mothers afterward. In the story, Doris Lessing never mentions the word apartheid. But she notes the burned, smooth, dark brown skin of the local boys in the unnamed seaside town where Jerry and his mother are vacationing. Here are the themes of the story: childhood and maturity, solitude versus community, nature. There is one interesting video in the YouTube. You can watch it and enjoy the process of Jerry's growth and maturity. Through the Tunnel is primarily a rebirth narrative. A 11-year-old boy makes the journey from boyhood to manhood, symbolically rendered by a perilous swim through an underwater tunnel. There are a few more themes too. Person versus self, which is nothing but the internal conflict and the external conflict that Jerry faces. He has two choices, and it's naturally how to overcome his fear and how Jerry battles his fear. He fears dying in the tunnel. but he eventually conquers his fear and safely makes it through the tunnel. This is, of course, the climax of the story, too. He was frightened. Supposing he turned dizzy in the tunnel, what would he do? How would he reach a shore? How would he meet his mother again? Will he be safe or he be drowned, trapped inside the sea? He thought he would go back to the house, and when he had another year's growth in him, then he would go through the hole. But though Jerry struggled with fear, which was preventing him from reaching his goal going through the tunnel. Coming to the symbolism of the story, there are two symbols. One is a rock, which also represents the story's conflict, Jerry's conflict, internal conflict with the external conflict. Because Jerry's fear is a rock that is preventing him from reaching his goal, just like the rock is preventing him from getting to the other side of the beach and other side of the tunnel too. In through the tunnel, the literal passage through the rock tunnel becomes a coming of age passage for Jerry. Having accomplished his challenge, he returns to his mother's company satisfied and confident of his future. He does not feel it necessary to tell his mother of the monumental obstacle that he has overcome. He's happy now, confident. And now, let's reflect and discover. In Through the Tunnel, Jerry puts his own safety at risk to prove something to himself. Or personal challenges, both risking one's safety or health. State your opinion in a brief essay. You can collect details from the story to support your opinion and arguments and substantiate your answer. Jerry struggles with conflicting feelings in Through the Tunnel. Now the question arises, what is Jerry's internal conflict? What actions represent both sides of this conflict? In a brief essay, you can evaluate and elaborate Jerry's internal conflict and how he resolves it. We find in the story that Jerry undergoes a change that may not be obvious to those around him, but which has profound meaning for the boy. How does Jerry change from the beginning of the story to the end? What qualities does he gain? Which ones does he leave behind? Write a character sketch of Jerry describing the changes that he undergoes in the story. And now coming to the exposition of the short story Through the Tunnel. The exposition is when the mother and Jerry arrive at the beach in a foreign country. This is where the characters are introduced. The tunnel in the story, which serves a metaphor for the story and the symbol for the story, it represents Jerry's passageway from youth to maturity, a symbolic journey from boyhood to manhood. By proving himself worthy, Jerry is showing the world that he is no longer a child. And in the end, we find Jerry's climactic swim through the dark, dangerous tunnel, which proves his strength and endurance. And the wild bay, it represents something the boy isn't supposed to do or can't do. It is something the older boys can do and the boy wants to do. The boy is basically, the bay is basically a rite of passage. And with this, we come to the end of the story. Read the story at home. Enjoy silent reading, loud reading. Let's, as human beings, dive deep, daring, dreamers. Let us become one as such. Thank you for listening.